Well, hello and welcome back to Owens Bay. At this very moment, we are looking at the waterfront of New Sunderland. What I thought I would do this time around would be to maybe work on a couple projects. We'll see how it goes. I thought first thing I might do was detail up an area that I made some time ago. Maybe try to finish it off a bit, make it look a little nicer, and perhaps start a new project, an historic location within the city. So I think what we're going to do first is we're going to do some detailing of this highway interchange over here. This interchange I did here was built fairly early on in the construction of the city. This was all done without the use of any modding tools, so just the vanilla road tools. And for the most part, it wasn't that difficult to do. The road tools out of the box of this game are quite good. There were a few niggly parts where things were not, lining up the way I'd want. Obviously, Move It and Anarchy and all that would have been very, very helpful, which I didn't have access to at the time. Now I do. I don't know if I'm really going to play that too much. I think what I really want to do is go back and revisit like the treed area and the grass and stuff and kind of tie it all together and make it look more like it's all part of the same landscape. When I did this, there wasn't really any options to do any of that, so I just ended up with default spruce trees all over the place. One thing I'm going to comment on is the graphics. You might be seeing a lot of blurring. That is NVIDIA's DLSS in effect. I would turn that off, but there is now this wonderful little tool up here, the performance monitor. I've installed that, and so while I'm using NVIDIA DLSS, my GPU usage is hovering around 60%, which is really, really nice. With DLSS off, my GPU usage is over 90%. So I'm going to leave it on. It's a lot easier on my GPU, and it's a lot quieter. So unfortunately, we're going to get a bit of blurring. So what am I going to do here? Well, I'm just going to try to think about this landscape and try to make it feel more, I don't know if real is the right word, but just give it a bit more detail. I see I got some issues here with the road. Get rid of this. No, you're not gonna be a pain. Let's see if I pull it out. You're just not gonna. Maybe if I do this. Okay, that works. My skill with Move It is still pretty rough. More times often than not, I find Move It kind of just... I usually end up making more of a mess than what I started with. Sometimes like this, it works quite well. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of most of these trees so we can work on the actual ground. So what we're going to do is choose our tree brush. We're going to bring up the strength to 100, turn off matching trees, and we're just going to erase everything we put down here. Like so. We're going to leave the trees at the base of this cliff area. Everything else is coming out of here. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back into landscaping. We're going to look at the actual terrain and see what we have here. Now, there's a lot of terraforming done around here to try to get these areas to look like they blend into the landscape fairly well. On looking at this again, I can see that maybe we can do a bit more smoothing out here. Oops, let's try this one. I think over here we're gonna probably just alter this a bit and then smooth this out. And that way this looks a little nicer. And same over here, it's gonna blend that in a bit. What I would like to do is, and what I've done on some of these locations, is just create little mounds. Kind of like, you think about road construction, and I have no knowledge of road construction. I'm just doing what I think looks good and what I kind of see when I'm driving down the road myself. So we have these little mounds in between the sections. I think we probably put one in here. So to do this, we're just going to raise the terrain a little bit. We're going to be very light on the strength, so it's not too extreme. All I want to do is bring this up a few meters and then use the leveling tool to bring it out. Larger area, and then use the smoothing tool just to knock it back down a bit again so it's not so obvious on the landscape. So now we have a slight little hill here. It's not, you know, from way up above, if we're looking at the game from this altitude, it's not really something you would notice or maybe even want to, you know, take time to do. But if you happen to be in close, it does look better like this. So what else are we going to do here? Well, we're going to get rid of some of the green. And what do I mean here? I mean, landscapes are never a uniform color. This particular grass texture from the, I forget which asset packs it's from, but it'll be listed on the map page. This one's quite nice. It kind of, you know, has this bit of, you know, texture to it. But, you know, from a high enough distance, it's pretty uniform and it's pretty blah. I wouldn't call it that interesting. So what we're going to do here is we are going to go into the surface tools and we're going to go into ground surfaces, and we're going to go first, we're going to go into ground surface textures, and then we're going to go down to Sully's excellent riverbed textures. Now, as I said before, the trick to using these is less is more. Kind of, I guess that's the thinking we should apply with these. Now, unfortunately, and I really hope this gets added at some point, I really want to see the elevation lines while I'm doing this so I can place these sorts of ground textures exactly where I want them. Right now, I'm kind of a bit, you know, I'm sort of guessing. I mean, this one's kind of obvious. I mean, it's right there. But, you know, if I'm doing like a gully or something, I really need to see the elevations line so I can paint in the surface textures exactly where I want them. Right now, it's a bit hit or miss. But anyway, we're going to start here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the riverbed thin. And the trick with these is not to be, don't go overboard. and keep them very, very random. Like we want very, very like non-regular shapes. Very, very like kind of all over the place. And then when you finish this, oops, that's not the one I wanted. Okay, let's try that again. Okay. Okay, so very irregular shapes, and maybe a couple of them. Like I don't need them to be everywhere. I want them to be kind of just as random as possible. In nature, things are seldom like uniform shapes. They're always a bit odd and weird. Okay, so let's start with this. So that's what we have. Now you can see it's broken up the ground a little bit. I mean, you can sort of, from far enough away, you can definitely see an outline around it. But it's a start. And what we're doing here is we're just breaking up the monotonous green texture of the default grass. Now, on top of that, what we want to do as well. So the look I'm trying to achieve here is I'm designing this city with, I guess, a season in mind. This is something that I think as more people play the game, this is probably going to become far more interesting as people actually design their cities for different seasons. Right now, it's still pretty bare bones. I'd love to see some people like really dig deep into like a fall season for their city. The game mechanic of the seasons changing is nice in theory, but in practice, while you're playing the game, it's really not great. Especially winter. Winter is awful. You can't see anything. It just makes trying to build stuff really, really bad. Also, the rain is really not fun to try to build in either. Ironically, for this particular map, because we're kind of like our theme is the Pacific Northwest, I went with the San Francisco weather, which was the closest option I had. Winter temperatures not quite as cold as this area would get, but literally on the San Francisco weather, it rains for the entire winter, which is very in keeping with this region. Unfortunately, I never use it. I turn it off. It is it's just depressing. I have no other way to describe it. It's just so depressing to have to play the game through like months and months of rain. It's just like, ugh. So I turn it off. So weather is kind of a mixed bag. But if somebody was building something with a specific season in mind, that could be very interesting. I didn't really start doing this, but I think where I'm kind of going for seasons, I think I'm kind of going for maybe late summer. So in late summer, things are starting to dry out a little bit. Things are not as fresh looking. So what we're going to do here to kind of give us an illusion of this maybe being a bit more dried out. Right now we have a bit, just a slight variation in ground texture. So we have some exposed dirt and stuff, but what we're also going to do is we're going to use the Golden Sands thin texture to give this, and we're going to overlap it over top of the other one. So we have some layers of different textures. What this does is it helps. So the ground textures, my big problem with them, and it's not a problem with the textures in themselves. It's just kind of a general problem with this sort of thing, and textures in general, is you put them over a large enough area and you'll start getting this tiling effect, which becomes very, very obvious. So by overlapping them like this and then keeping them really, really random, what we're doing is we're breaking up the monotony of the actual pattern inherent in the texture itself. And then, so now what we have is this kind of like overlapping thing. So we have a mixture of exposed ground, some rocks, and some what now appears to be dried grass, even though it's supposed to be a transition from sand to grass. In this, used this way, this kind of looks, it kind of like, if you didn't know, you just assume this was dried grass, which is perfect. Now, what also I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to think about the fact that this is a slight hill. And so what's happening is the higher areas of the hill would dry out before the lower areas, right? So where the grass is going to go brown first is most likely around the top. So what we're going to do is we're going to add one more layer, and this one we're going to keep very, very small, the golden sand medium. I don't want to use too much of this. Too much of this is way too overpowering. So we just want this in really kind of small controlled patches and very, very tiny, kind of hoping to get the very top of the hill or near the top, indicating that this is kind of like where the driest part of this hill is. And let's just see what this looks like. Okay, so that's what we got so far. Now, if we bring up the contour lines just to take a look, okay, we more or less got the top. It's okay to have a little, a few green spots. You want it to be irregular. You don't want it to be, you want it to be as random as possible. You want it to be irregular simply because in nature, these things are never regular. They would never have a pattern to them. It would always be this kind of like, a bit here, a bit there. Anyway, so, but what happens if we kind of scroll up high enough, we'll start to actually see the outline of where we actually drew in the textures. And so we want to also try to hide this. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in some ground cover to kind of break up the surface. And we're going to go plants. We're going to choose the multiple bushes. We're going to dial down the brush size very small, and we're going to dial down the strength to, I'm going to say 45, yeah, maybe 40. What we also want to do is pick out some of these bushes. Now, for this purpose, we are not going to use these two. They have their places where you can use them. For this, I don't like them. These are okay, but I think two is one too many, so we're going to get rid of one. We're also going to include the green bush, this bush, this one, and this one. So this is going to be our set. And now for sizing, we're going to keep these small. The idea is, if you think about this interchange, right? This isn't a well-manicured area, but it is a maintained area, meaning 2-3 times a season, they're going to come in, they're going to mow down the grass. They're going to, it's not going to be allowed to get completely wild. Also, you got to keep in mind where the cars, join lanes and stuff. You got to leave this all clear in here so the cars can actually see oncoming traffic and stuff. So we're going to focus our attention for shrubs and plants and all that closer to the center, and we're not going to get too close into here. And we're also going to keep the sizes small. The idea being here is in these sorts of areas, we're not going to find any large trees. This is, at best, like if we were to put an age of this intersection in terms of the city, this is a fairly recent development. We could maybe say, the 80s, 1980s, 1990s maybe, is when this would have been constructed. And so it's not enough time for big huge trees to grow in, and the city would never allow large trees to grow back in here again. They'd keep everything pretty under control. So we're going to do the same thing. So what we're first going to do is we're just going to put down a very light like scattering of these bushes. We're not going to go crazy. We don't want like full coverage of these. We just want these to kind of help break up some stuff. And we should turn anarchy off, otherwise we're going to get bushes everywhere we don't want them. And I better be careful not to actually delete a road. Okay, so that's our start. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we are going to go. We're still going to use the tree brush, but now we're going to go back to single trees. We're going to go in with the London plane. Choose this. We're going to keep the ages young as well, the first 2 stages of the tree's life. This keeps the tree size small. We don't want the full grown trees here. And what we're also going to do is we are going to sink these. Oops. No, we're not going 20 meters into the ground. We are going about 4 meters into the ground. And for this, I am going to turn the anarchy back on. I'm just going to have to be very, very careful where I put this. I might actually reduce the brush strength even lower. Now, what happens when I'm just going to do kind of a random thing with these. So not too, and I'm going to get them on the road. Yeah. Okay. Like this. And I'm going to come in here and fix my mistakes, like so. Okay, now that we have that, we're going to go back into our trees. We're going to keep that. We're going to up the level just a meter, just so they are a little higher, and then we're going to switch to single tree. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this random splattering, and now we're going to kind of, oh, here, hold on. This is something else that really needs to be. I hope somebody at some point fixes this. So for trees, like we got these snapping options, which are great. I mean, we need these for the decals on buildings and stuff. But for when I'm planting trees, this snap to surfaces really needs to be default off. It shouldn't be on, because I don't know how many times I went to put trees and I'm stacking trees on top of trees and they're sticking in shapes and stuff I don't want. I just wish that was like just automatically default off, and if I really wanted to stack them, I could do it. But unfortunately, I always have to kind of manage. So what we want to do is kind of go in here, and now we want to kind of link up some of these bushy areas, not all of them, just kind of following what's here, like so. And we're just going to do this randomly. What I like about these, this method of doing bushes, oh, that's under the ground. Why is that so low? So, nope, no, let's go up one. Okay, I don't see it. Okay. What I like about this, using this as the brush, bush texture for bushes, these look far more natural. This looks more like actual, like how ground cover would grow. They also have a passing resemblance to, so in my area of the world, and I'm sure this is very common in many other places around the world as well, we have Himalayan blackberry growing everywhere. It's everywhere. So, and these sorts of bushes kind of give the resemblance of that sort of plant. And what we can now do is we can switch it up a little bit, and we can go into the apple tree. We don't necessarily for the apple tree want the youngest. It's too small, so we're just going to go with this the young one. And we're going to also drop these about 4 meters into the ground, and this will just give us a little bit of variation in color. So it's not this monochromatic. And I don't want too many of these. This is just to kind of break up the monotony of the other one. So we're going to keep it light. Okay. Now, what else are we going to do here? I think, hold on, before we go any further, I am just going to add a few more of these to the top just to break this up a little bit so it's not so... Okay, yeah, that should be okay. Okay. Now, what else are we going to do here? So, obviously, when these areas are developed, the city will go in and plant shrubs and bushes and stuff. I'm keeping it a little on the wild side, just I think it looks a little better this way. But what we are going to do is we are going to add some spruce trees. But what we're going to do with the spruce trees is we are also going to keep these young. We're going to keep them saplings and young trees. The idea being that these are not old trees, and this would be in an area where there wouldn't necessarily be old trees quite yet. And we're just going to do them in random groupings throughout this. And we'll just see what it looks like when we're done. So what I want to do is just keep, them in very small, tight clusters. I don't want them... Where I don't want them is I'm not going to put them down in here, right? Because that's going to be kept clear by the city so traffic can see, even though this traffic is, diverging from one another, that's still going to be kept clear. So we don't want to get too crazy in there. So yeah, so I think that's probably about what we're going to do for that. And then so now we have this sort of look to this area, which looks far more, it just looks a little better. Now, another thing we can do, this is a little more time consuming, but one thing about this game, and I mentioned it already with the railroad tracks, but it also applies to the road. These roads are just way too pristine. Like the edges on them, like they don't blend to the landscape at all. And trying to actually do that, like with the decals and staining and stuff, yeah, you can, but I mean the amount of work involved in doing that, it's just it's really not worth it. At least not at this point in the game. I'm just waiting for when custom assets come out. I'm sure somebody's going to come out with new road textures which are going to look much better. So I am going to, another thing we could do is just, so the transition from the grass to the road, it's a bit, it's like this razor sharp line. It obviously does not look natural. So what we could do with this is we can go back in the decals and we'll just use the same idea we did before. At this time, we're just going to use the golden sand. We're not going to use the dirt. I think this mixing and matching of these surfaces, that is like an aesthetic choice. Everybody's gonna come up with something a little different that they like, and that makes, and as the game matures, we're probably gonna have far more options for this as well. So this is just something that's going to get better in time. These are the ones I like. Obviously you could play with any of these. I mean, there's so many. Some of them better than others, but you got a lot of stuff to play around here. I am just going to use, for this purpose, I'm going to go use the golden sand thin texture. And what I'm going to do here is, this is going to be a bit time consuming, but what I'll do is I'm going to follow the road, and I don't have to do this everywhere. I can pick and choose where I want to do it. Like I said, it's will take a long time to do, but it does look very, very nice. And what we're going to do is kind of create a transition zone between the road and the grass, where it's like this. It's not perfect, right? It's a very irregular transition zone. So what I'm going to do here is we're not going to come out very far, and you got to be careful not to overlap the textures here. We're going to turn off snapping because that makes that easier. Maybe get it a little closer, and then you just want to try to keep this very, very irregular and very, very small. You don't want this to be close. Maybe a few larger areas, but then very, very close again, and maybe very, very tiny like this. So as irregular as you can stand it. I mean, I like I said, this doing a lot of area like this will be a very tedious thing to do. And hopefully also in the future we just will be able to paint on surfaces with a brush, which would be just ideal. And now what I want to do is just bring it in, and then it all disappears. Oh my god, see, like just like that. Okay, let me try that one more time. Okay, there we go. So now what we have is we have a bit of this irregular surface between the road and the grass. It's not perfect, but it looks a lot better than just the harsh transition that we had. And what we're going to do is we are going to do it in a few more locations as well. And I'm going to, for this bit, I'm just going to shut up and do some work, and I'll be back when I am done. Okay. I think I've had enough of that for the moment. That was a lot of work. But I think it looks amazing. So, yeah. A lot of work into that. But I think, you know, the results are very pleasing to look at. Just to point out a couple things here before I wrap it up. This rock retaining wall I put in, I did that fairly early on. I'm still not sure if I like it or not. I like the idea of it. I just don't know. Yeah, I have to think about it. I did some of this darker sidewalk texture over top of it just to kind of give it a little more, you know, variation on its surface, and added a few of these bushes in really low just to kind of act like weeds growing on it. I'm not 100% sold on it, but I think we're just going to leave it for now. Maybe replace it with something in the future. I'm not 100%. I did make a little mistake over here. You can probably see it. I meant to use the thin golden sands texture, not the medium. As you can see, if you use the medium, you definitely get a line. So I'll probably come back and fix that at some point. But overall, I think this looks really nice. I think it just brings this whole area to life. Before it was just a very boring space, and it's essentially the same space now, but you know, it does just visually it has a little more oomph to it than it did beforehand. Yeah, so I think that's it for today. I did say I was going to work on a historical landmark. I think we'll just save that for another project. This is, yeah, for today, this is it. If you like this, please like the video or leave a comment. Give me some feedback on what you guys think. Obviously, this is, I think, my second video. This is my second video, so I'm not expecting a lot of viewers or anything. But if anybody's out there watching it and you like what you see, let me know. And I think for today, that will be it. Let's get a little view of the skyline here before we take off. I really am liking how the city is looking. Okay. And we'll just end here back where we started. Okay. If you watched to the end, thank you. And I will see you all next time. Bye.